Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. You guys asked and you guys shall receive. I do want to explain why I wasn't initially planning on making a video about the closing submissions, and it's really pure and simple. It's because closing submissions are a summation. So the lawyers for each party are simply summarizing their case for the judge. So there are no new arguments, no new information, no new evidence is allowed to be submitted. It's just one last chance for each party to reiterate their case to the judge in order to convince him to decide in their favor. I also received a lot of requests to discuss Amber's press conference that she held while Mr. Sherborne was still going through his closing submissions, and I will be commenting on that towards the end of the video. All right, with that out of the way, we can get into looking at the submissions for each party, starting with NGN. A subscriber called Becca, hi Becca, asked me almost 2 weeks ago on the first day of Amber's testimony what my strategy would be if I were a lawyer for NGN. And within 5 minutes, I came up with a very rough kind of strategy and responded to her comment, and I'll be displaying it on the screen for you right now. The reason I am doing this is because this strategy that I outlined in 5 minutes is pretty much what NGN's strategy turned out to be. Now, of course, I'm not saying this to say, oh, look, I'm a great lawyer. I came up with their entire defense in 5 minutes. Far from it. What I'm trying to say is that the reason why NGN's overall strategy turned out to be so similar to mine is because there really isn't much leeway. There's not much these lawyers can do to argue their case other than these few strategies, which are basically arguing that she stayed with Johnny out of fear and out of love, and because he kept feeding her broken promises of change, and pointing out to the court how absolutely ludicrous it is to assume that someone like Amber would have been planning this hoax so far in advance since 2013. I'm not saying I believe in these arguments. They are weak, as I said in my comment. But this is pretty much the only strategy. Maybe there are a little bit more, if there are any lawyers out there who can come up with other strategies to argue for NGN. But the fact that something that a junior lawyer such as myself came up with in 5 minutes is pretty much the entire strategy for NGN's lawyers is a testament to how limited their options are. So to start with, Ms. Wass reminded the judge that the defendants are relying on the defense of truth or substantial truth, and that if one incident or allegation was proven to be true, then that is enough to satisfy the requirements of this defense. The judge did point out the very important distinction between self-defense and unlawful violence. So if Johnny hurt Amber in self-defense, then the judge will not consider that as proof of him being a wife beater. It must have been unlawful violence. The main argument presented in their closing submissions is that Johnny was a drug-addled monster who had no idea or recollection of what he was doing. So essentially they're saying that he doesn't admit to anything because he doesn't even remember doing it. Ms. Wass also relied on the TMZ video and other evidence of Johnny hitting or punching inanimate objects as proof that he also has the tendency to hit humans, which in my opinion is an incredibly weak argument, probably one of the weakest arguments they presented in this case. And Mr. Sherborne will do a very good job of pointing this out to the judge in his closing submissions, but we'll get to that later on in the video. Ms. Wass reiterated her argument that all of Johnny's witnesses are lying for him because most of them happen to be employees of his and it is in their favor to cover for him. Now, this is another weak argument because it ignores the fact that some of these people no longer work for Johnny or have never worked for him at all, such as the police officers and the building staff at the Eastern Columbia building. Johnny wasn't paying them. He didn't own the building. They had no reason to lie for him. So what about those witnesses? What about Kevin Murphy, who hasn't worked for Johnny for 4 years at this point? They also dragged Adam Waldman, Johnny's US lawyer, into this and said that Laura Divinier is proof that all of the witness statements were manipulated and influenced by Adam Waldman and that the witnesses simply agreed to whatever he wrote in the declaration and just signed. Now, I've explained in previous videos, I think with regards to Laura Divinier in particular, why this is another weak argument, because all of these people are adults. They have to read through and review the declarations or the statements before they sign them. So essentially, Ms. Wass is accusing all of the witnesses of lying because they knowingly signed a false declaration. Next, she got to Amber Heard herself. She described her demeanor as composed, impressive, and a truthful witness, and that her evidence alone should be considered as enough to rule in NGN's favor. I think my last video, part 5 of the witness testimony, in its entirety can demonstrate why this argument is an absolute failure. Mr. Sherborne addresses this particular claim in detail in his submission, so this is another point I will return to later in the video. One valid point, in my opinion, that Ms. Wass raised is the absence of medical experts to testify in this trial. So Dr. Kipper, Nurse Debbie Lloyd, the other nurse, Nurse Erin, and Dr. Cowan. So all of the medical reports being relied on were hearsay because they are out-of-court statements. So Ms. Wass's argument was that little weight should be attributed to these medical notes because the authors were not available to be cross-examined on their content, which is a valid argument, and I really do wonder why none of these medical experts have been involved in either the US defamation case or this one. This, of course, is in NGN's favor because a lot of these medical notes had comments about Amber that corroborated Johnny's evidence, such as evidence of her jealousy, insecurity, substance abuse problems, rage or anger management problems, and so on. Ms. Wass also relied on the testimony of Catherine Kendall, who, as you all know by now, actually opposed The Sun and their article and found it absolutely abhorrent that they misused her words to make it look like she was saying Johnny was the abusive one, when in fact she stated herself that she had heard Amber was the one who was abusing him. Ms. Wass still reiterated her testimony and reminded the judge that women are afraid of powerful and influential men such as Harvey Weinstein and, of course, Johnny Depp. So they reiterated that connection once again, which I think I mentioned in a previous video is a low blow. We've already talked about this. Harvey is a convicted criminal. Johnny Depp is a free man and he is innocent until proven guilty. And this is not a criminal case about domestic violence. Johnny is not standing trial here. Wass's closing words were, "Having heard all of the evidence in this case and all of the supporting evidence of the incidents of violence, we suggest that there is no doubt that Mr. Depp regularly and systematically abused his wife. The characterization that he is a wife beater is entirely truthful. This is the way we put the case." You know, I've made remarks along the way, but I do also want to say that had this been a defamation claim about Johnny being a drug addict, NGN would have won 1000%, but it's not. This is a claim against an allegation that he is a wife beater. I've already said this in a previous video, and that video was published very early on, and 3 weeks later, I still stand by what I said in that video. I don't see how the defendants have satisfied the requirements of the defense of truth. All right, on to the closing submissions on behalf of Johnny Depp. First of all, I am aware that a lot of you are very concerned about the fact that Mr. Sherborne had to rush through his submissions towards the end because he was running out of time. I have responded to a few of these concerns, but just to say it here in a video, there is nothing to worry about. It's not going to impact Johnny's case because, as I said, closing submissions are just a summation. The judge isn't being fed any further information. He has all the evidence that he needs to make a decision. So the main point being made by the claimant's case is that Amber is a compulsive liar. Her evidence was constantly shifting and inconsistent. If you haven't watched part 5 of the witness testimony videos that I've made, do make sure to watch it because I highlight a lot of these inconsistencies. Not all of them because there are far too many, but I focus on what I believed were the most obvious ones. So naturally, it was submitted that this fact, her inconsistent evidence, directly affects her credibility as a witness, and that she failed on the following 5 counts. Consistency with available evidence, internal consistency of the witness's evidence, so the fact that her evidence in and of itself was inconsistent. Consistency with what other witnesses deposed or said in other occasions, the witness's credibility with regards to other external matters that aren't directly relevant to the core issue of the case. So for example, the dog smuggling incident and lying about Savannah McMillan not being her assistant. And finally, the demeanor of the witness. We haven't personally seen her demeanor in trial, but I think based on what we've seen in her depositions and also to some extent in the press conference that she held, we can pretty much guess what her demeanor was like. Mr. Sherborne also played out the entire TMZ video. Yes, that same video that NGN were so in love with and were so adamant to keep playing over and over again throughout the course of this trial to discredit Johnny's witnesses. That same video is played out by Mr. Sherborne. Why would he do that? Because he played out the entire clip, something that none of us have seen. So the video that we've seen as the public ends when Johnny discovers the hidden camera, and it looks like he grabs it angrily and then the video cuts. So you're left to imagine what on earth he could have done to Amber after that discovery. Except the full-length video actually shows Amber picking up the camera and smiling, looking incredibly smug and pleased with herself. I want to read out a really funny and spot-on comment by Mr. Sherborne regarding this video. He said, "Yet it was played over and over again to witnesses so many times that you would be forgiven for thinking that this was a trial of Johnny Depp, the kitchen cupboard beater, rather than wife beater." I mean, need I say more? Need anyone say more? This is what we've all been saying from the beginning of this trial. In fact, I have an entire video that I made specifically talking about this TMZ video. I released it back in May. So again, if you haven't watched that, I do recommend that you do. But in that video, I basically say, what does this prove? I mean, sure, he's hitting cabinets and banging them and slamming them, but he's not touching her. And more importantly, she wasn't in any way, at any point, afraid of him, even when he was in that state of anger and frustration. Her only concern was angling the camera to make sure that he was in frame the entire time. Mr. Sherborne makes this very point to the judge. Why would that be her only concern? Why isn't she terrified of him? Because she knew. She knew that she was safe around him, even when he was in that state. Another really good point made is that Amber clearly has a hobby of secretly recording conversations and incidents. And Laura Divineer is an example of that. The aftermath of the Australian incident is an example of that. It's not foreign to her to resort to these things. So why is it then, Mr. Sherborne asks, that there is not one secret recording of Johnny beating her or threatening her life or doing any of the things that she has alleged to have happened? During the 3-day hostage ordeal in Australia, she had her phone and her iPad with her the entire time, by her own admission. If she was really in danger of dying, of getting killed, why not call for help? I know a lot of people might think, well, she's terrified of him, so she's not going to call for help. But come on, 3 days of a hostage ordeal and you're not going to call for help? Finally, there were submissions about damages, which is the monetary compensation that would be awarded to the claimant if he wins this case. I figured maybe it's a little bit not interesting to people, I'm not sure. So just let me know if you are interested in knowing what Johnny will get if he wins, and I'll be more than happy to make a short video discussing that. Mr. Sherborne concludes his submissions with this. This is not about money. This is vindicating him for his reputation. Because Johnny Depp, kitchen cupboard beater, he can live with. But Johnny Depp, wife beater, he cannot. I mean, I know it sounds like I'm fangirling over this guy, and I'm not. I'm just appreciating him from one lawyer to the other. That was poetic. He has a way with words, and words are a lawyer's greatest tool. We are advocates. We stand in court before a judge and before a jury, and we use our words to get the results that we want. It's a persuasive kind of job. And purely from a professional standpoint, Mr. Sherborne has a way with words. Okay, so I do have a few closing remarks about these submissions and about this trial in general, but I will talk about them after we quickly look into the press conference that was held by Amber while Mr. Sherborne was still going through his closing submissions. So the trial was still in session. I'm not gonna play the conference for you. You guys can look it up. There is footage of it everywhere. I have watched it, obviously, I had to. But I also found out that Amber posted the entire script, so word for word what she said. And I will be putting up a screenshot for you guys right now. If you wanna read it, you can pause. This press conference did not sit well with me. And from all the comments I've seen from you guys, it didn't sit well with you either. Hold the press conference if you want. It's your right, whatever. but wait until the damn trial is over. And even if she didn't want to wait until the conclusion of the trial, why didn't she hold this press conference on the day of NGN's closing submissions? It would have made more sense. They submitted their case, which is in her favor. Why not make a comment at the end of that day? She's essentially conveying the message of, I don't care what you're saying. I know you're in court, and I'm going to detract all of the media attention and make sure that it's all focused on what I have to say, not what Mr. Sherborne has to say, because she knows very well that the media is very focused on this trial, and they've been reporting on it every single day. They've reported on NGN's closing submissions, and they've highlighted what NGN had to say, which was all in Amber's favor. And so she knew that the media will then focus on what Mr. Sherborne had to say and highlight things that were in Johnny's favor. And in my opinion, she didn't want Johnny's team to have the final say in the media. One thing that really irked me is how she said his litigation. She didn't even refer to Johnny by his name. Incredibly dismissive. Amber's supporters would argue, why the hell would she respect him? He abused her. And you know what? They're just going to believe that. Let them believe it. I'm not here to convince them or change their minds. If they can't see the truth for what it is, it's not our job to convince them. But let's just hope that all these people supporting her don't find themselves in Johnny's shoes one day, or don't find their loved ones in Johnny's shoes one day, because this can happen to anyone. And I, of all people, know this can happen to anyone because I was personally involved in a case with a male victim that is extremely similar to what happened to Johnny, except in the case I was involved in, it was sexual abuse rather than physical violence. Now, it is a reserved decision, so that means the judge will take his time before making a judgment or a decision. Usually, a reserved decision can take up to 3 months. In this case, media outlets have stated that September is the most likely month during which the decision will be released. And yes, this is incredibly normal and a very reasonable amount of time, because don't forget, this is 3 weeks worth of content that the judge has to go through and consider when making a judgment. I just want to close this video by saying this. This, to me, has never been about Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. It's always been about who's right and who's wrong, who's telling the truth and who's lying. I was a fan of Amber's. I would watch a movie if I knew she was in it. I remember watching her in The Danish Girl. I remember watching her in Magic Mike, was it Triple XL, Double XL, whatever XL. And I remember just thinking she was the most beautiful and coolest kind of tomboy, effortlessly cool chick I had ever seen. And when I heard she married Johnny, I actually went, that is so cool, because I like the two of them. So this is not a personal vendetta against Amber, or this isn't a misogynistic kind of crusade. I believe in equality. I'm not a misogynist, that's for sure. I think men and women deserve equal rights and equal treatment. And I've always been this way. It's how I've been raised. If the roles were reversed, if Amber was indeed the victim, I would be making these exact same videos with equal passion and vigor to defend her and to bring out the truth. One of the first videos that I released on this channel in February of this year, actually, was a video that I made right after I had come back from the police station with a male victim of sexual abuse committed by a woman. And I was exhausted. I was broken because the system, the legal system, is just so rigged against men. And I think it's evident from that video how tired and how just disillusioned I was with my job, with the legal profession, with the justice system, with the police, because they just let men down every day. And this case is proof of that fact, that society refuses to place men in the mold of a victim, that a man always has to be the abuser. And Sasha Wass really played on this in her closing submissions. She really emphasized the fact that Amber is a woman and she is so much smaller and so much weaker than Johnny. How could she physically assault him or overpower him? It's physically impossible. He is the man, he is the perpetrator, she is the woman, she is the victim. Essentially, that was their case, apart from arguing that he was a drug addict. We need to break that mold. And if Johnny wins this case, it will be a landmark decision, because it will finally show the world that yes, a man can be a victim of domestic violence or sexual abuse or whatever it is. at the hands of a female perpetrator. It happens every day, but the justice system lets down men every day. So this isn't just about Johnny. This is about fighting for what's right and fighting against what's wrong. That's it for this video. I know it got a little bit passionate towards the end. I couldn't help it. It's legitimately how I feel. And when people say you're just supporting Johnny for the heck of it, I'm like, you know what? Just think that if you want. I honestly couldn't care less what these Amber Heard supporters are saying. I do want to say this isn't the end with regards to this case. There will be a couple more videos in which I will be responding to frequently asked questions that I get in relation to this trial and the outcome. So stay tuned for those. They will be out next week. And of course, if you guys have any more questions and if I get enough of a certain question, I will be more than happy to make a video to address these questions as well. As always, do let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for all your support. I don't even use Twitter that much. I know I have an account there, but my goodness, the support that I have been receiving there that I have been completely oblivious to, by the way. I only found out yesterday when I logged in. Thank you so much to everyone in the Twitter community. You have no idea how much my heart just swelled at all the positivity and the love that you're sending my way. Thank you so much. Stay safe, everyone, and I'll catch you in a future video.